All right. I'd like to thank everybody for attending today. My name is Callan Spariosu. I'm an emergency management coordinator with the City of Los Angeles Emergency Management Department, and I'm with the Operations and Training Division. This webinar is going to be an adverse weather webinar, which is coinciding with our integrated preparedness planning cycle this year. The hazard focus is adverse weather, and within that, we're going to be talking a lot about atmospheric rivers, which has been a major a major issue in the last few years. So we have a great group of presenters today. Nadan, if you could move to the agenda. So, oh, you know what? We're going to start off with our general manager, Carol Parks, and let me see if she's on. Give me one moment. Okay, I don't see Carol in here, so we'll get back to her. Oh, you know what? She's in another Google Meet. Give me 1 second. I'm going to send her an invite. Sorry for the delay, everybody. Okay, apologize, everybody. So just for the sake of moving this forward, let's go ahead and start with our next presenter, and we'll go back to Carol. We have John Dumas from the National Weather Service, and he's going to give a presentation on adverse weather. John, I believe you have presenter privileges, so go ahead, sir.
It says I can't start my video because the host has stopped it.
Okay, give me 1 second.
And then am I going to drive the slides, or you're going to move them?
Yeah, go ahead and present the slides if you can. I don't think I can change or allow you to put video on. Doesn't look like it, so I apologize.
Okay.
I'll try to work on that.
Okay. So I hope that you're seeing a picture of my beautiful office now. Can you let me know if that's working?
Yep, got it.
Okay. All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Dumas. I am the Science and Operations Officer at the National Weather Service office in Oxnard, California. Some of you know about the Weather Service, but in case you don't, the Weather Service has national centers that you've probably heard of, things like the National Hurricane Center. But they also have divided the country up, and you can see on the map there's 122 different what are called weather forecast offices, or WFOs. And they all look pretty much like this one, unless they're co-located with some other partners. But we have what are called county warning areas, or CWAs, that divide up the whole country. So the area for Los Angeles Oxnard, and I'm going to call that LOX from now on, goes all the way from Los Angeles County through San Luis Obispo County. And there's more than 12 million people in there. So A lot of times when you're looking at our forecast and you say, oh, why can't they get this right? It's a clear sky above me. We are doing quite a large area and try to give everybody equal weight when we're describing the weather. Sometimes we're a little Los Angeles specific because that's where most of the people are. And the strategic goal of the National Weather Service is what's called a weather-ready nation. So outreach talks like this are pretty important and trying to keep people away from harm. So let's move on to that. And just a little disclosure before I get going. I am going to be talking about some weather events that have the ability to do some serious harm. They can damage buildings. They can even kill some people. So we always say with this, don't be scared, be prepared. So hopefully you'll come away from this lesson feeling a little more confident that you understand the weather and what you can do about it. All right, so just to get some terminology out there first, there's lots of, when people talk bad weather or dangerous weather or something, but there's a specific term called severe weather that we use in the National Weather Service. And it means one of these three specific things here. Severe weather is a thunderstorm that's producing hail that's at least an inch in diameter or larger. And that's a little bit larger than a quarter. So if you think back to last Thursday, if you were in the Pasadena area, you got a severe thunderstorm warning, and it mentioned a quarter-size hail. So that's why. Another thing that could be with this is maybe it's producing wind gusts of 58 miles an hour or more. And just to put that in perspective, you can have hurricane force winds aren't that much stronger than this. So pretty strong wind gusts coming out of one of these. A third thing that could cause it to be called severe is if there is a tornado. A tornado is going to make it severe no matter what. And while lightning can be deadly, if we just use lightning to define a severe thunderstorm, then every thunderstorm would be severe because the lightning heating up the atmosphere is what makes the thunder. So not all thunderstorms are severe. Taking a look at maps, boy, do we love maps in the National Weather Service. But looking at this map, you can see the thunderstorm distribution and not too many along California's coast. And that's primarily because the water temperature is pretty low. If you're on the other extreme over in Florida, you get a sea breeze that drives that warm, moist air in towards the center of the panhandle down there. And that meets from both east and west and forms a line of clouds just about every afternoon. So you can see 100 days out of the year, they're getting thunderstorms in Florida. Ours are much more rare. We do have two particular seasons currently during, a winter storm like we just had. The other time is during what's called the southwest monsoon, which in our area is around July, August, where we get warm, moist air coming up from Mexico that can cause some afternoon thunderstorms. A lot of times they'll be forming right along the eastern edge of Los Angeles County, especially out maybe over Antelope Valley area. Okay, another thing I talked about was hail. So what exactly makes the hail and how can it get so darn big? So anytime you see one of those great big thunderstorm clouds out there, and these can go up tens of thousands of feet high. These are things that aircraft are going to steer around because inside of them are the really strong updrafts that are driving them up. And there can be some very strong cold downdrafts that drive out of this that produce those winds that I talked about earlier. If you have water particles that run into things that they can condense on, like, I don't know, air pollution or little bits of dust or any kinds of things that are in the air, they'll start to grow into water drops. And as the water drops fall down, maybe they're going to make it all the way to the surface, but maybe they'll get caught in one of these updrafts. And if they keep going up in what's called the hail growth zone on this, and that's just because it's cold enough to freeze that water into ice, it'll get a layer of ice on it. And picture that happening again and again and again and again. The hail will grow until finally the stone is so heavy that it's going to fall down. So that's how you can get some hail. Most of the time out here with our storms, we don't get much bigger than 1 inch. And remember, that's about a quarter size. For the record keepers out there, there was a storm in 2018 that had somewhere between 7.5 to 9 inches across. Not too uncommon. You'll hear in the Midwest, in that Tornado Alley area, that there's baseball size hail coming down or tennis ball size. That type of stuff, when it comes down, can do severe damage to property and, of course, any people that are out there. So you can see in this picture, hail and car windshields are a really bad combination. And if you live someplace that has the larger hail in it, odds are you've got some special construction in your house or roof. For us out in California, we don't expect it to be that bad. If you're home, some safety tips: just head inside, close your blinds and drapes just in case one of those hailstones would break your window. Stay away from windows, or if you have skylights, generally speaking, you don't want to get to somewhere in the interior part of your house. If you're driving, you should definitely try to stay in your vehicle. It will provide you more shelter than if you were to try and get out there and have the hail hit you. Slow down and pull over, because if you do get one of these that cracks your windshield and suddenly you can't see, you don't want to be driving at speed on any roads. And then again, the broken glass procedures: turn your back to the windows, maybe cover yourself with a blanket. Okay, lightning. So lightning, all thunderstorms produce lightning, right? So it's actually the lightning that produces the thunder. When the lightning strikes, it's about 50,000 degrees, which is hotter than the surface of the sun, and it explodes the atmosphere out. That's the sound that you hear. So on average, about 400 people get struck by lightning. And yes, most of those are men who think they know better than a storm. So don't be one of them. On average, we're going to get about 50 people, unfortunately, who are killed by a lightning strike. Lightning can actually strike 15 or more miles from the actual storm. You might have heard an expression, boy, that was a bolt out of the blue. That's because you don't have to be right under the storm for the lightning to be out there. And so we do have a little safety saying on here. We try to come up with these things that are catchy, just so you remember them. When thunder roars, go indoors. So if you're close enough that you're hearing thunder, you're probably close enough that there could be lightning strikes. Take some kind of shelter. If you're part of the deaf community and don't hear thunder, we use, if you see a flash, make a dash. So for some lightning safety tips, you're going to want to get away from water. One of the things we do, if we see any lightning activity headed towards the beaches in Los Angeles, we give the lifeguards a call. But I know pools, a lot of them have warning devices set up to get people out of the pools. Don't take shelter under a small canopy like a tent or trees, because lightning will probably strike the highest point, which could be that. So try to get someplace indoors. If you're in a group of people, maybe spread out so that you're all not hit by lightning. If it were to come down, let's say you're out with a group hiking, try and spread out a little bit so that if somebody should get struck, the others can go for help. If you are indoors, again, you probably don't want to be soaking in a bathtub if lightning's going off around your house. Stay away from doors and windows. You might want to unplug appliances. I had a house in Virginia that lightning struck my house, and it made little popping noises along the wall as all of the nails were suddenly electrified, and it fried my television. So it can happen. All right, so those are some general things that go along with severe weather. Let's talk a little bit more about some Los Angeles specific things. And I know a first one that people are really interested in is the atmospheric river. So let's hit on that. And if you're thinking to yourself, boy, they talk about atmospheric rivers a lot, and they never used to. What's up with that? The term atmospheric river was only introduced into the the glossary of meteorology within the last 10 years. These storms have always been there. There was just no agreed upon criteria to call one a river or not. So the scientists got together. They finally agreed it's got to have a certain amount of flow over a certain amount of time. It's got to be in a certain shape. And once we've defined it, well, then it makes it really easy for computers to find them. It can go back in time and look at when they happened in the past to build up a climatology, and it can look at forecasting for those specific conditions. So if it feels to you like, boy, I never used to hear that we might talk about a Pineapple Express, but this is why. It's a fairly new term for a long-term phenomenon. And for the state of California, we get most of our precipitation from these kind of storms. And what happens is, what I'm going to show you on the next map, this is what the kind of storm where you might see on a satellite image, the line of clouds that just goes straight from the Hawaiian Islands, which is on the lower left portion of this picture, all the way into the state of California. So that's why the newscasters used to call these the Pineapple Express is coming. It's straight from Hawaii to us. And what I've drawn on there, that L is the low pressure system. You see the classic comma shape with this. Normally you'd think if you're under the L, that's where the storm is going to be. So what do I care about a storm that's way off the coast of San Francisco? And normally you'd be right. But in this particular kind of storm, things set up well that the counterclockwise motion around the low pressure system is going to draw a whole bunch of moisture in, and it just happens to run into the mountain ranges along coastal California. And when the water is lifted up, it really has a chance to precipitate out. And so most of the time when you see these, the highest precip totals are going to be places where there is elevation. So along the transverse range that runs by Santa Barbara, or the Santa Monica Mountains, like we saw on this last storm, or further into Los Angeles County. So atmospheric rivers, been around forever. We have a name for them now. They can produce easily, as you've seen in this last year, maybe 3 to 5 inches of rain in one storm. And if you think about that, Los Angeles normal annual precip is only about 15 inches. So 3 to 5 of these storms, you're going to have a normal year, maybe 1 or 2 more, and all of a sudden it's above normal precip. Even 1 less could be enough to call it a drought year. So the other kind of winter storm that we would get, picture that low pressure system, but without the big, long trailing clouds all the way to Hawaii. It just drops down out of the Gulf of Alaska and passes through and brings a little rain with a front. It'll be much shorter than an atmospheric river, which can go on for days. Another thing that perhaps you've seen a lot of lately are tornadoes. We don't get many of them here in California compared to the rest of the country. But as you can see here, we get about 9 per year in the state. And I apologize for the less than high-tech graphic there, but on the left, you can see in the Los Angeles basin, there's quite a few of those black marks on there. Those are all places where tornadoes were recorded. And if they did the study, they came out with per square mile, the LA basin is actually more susceptible to tornadoes than some parts of Oklahoma and Nebraska, where you think, well, that's where they form. A big difference is we don't get the big ones here. The way they measure the strength of a tornado is by the damage that it does. So it's not like a hurricane where you can say it's a Category 2 storm coming, because most of these things happen so quickly, we really don't have the chance to get sensors on it while they're happening. Or if we can, they're so destructive, it would be hard to do. So after a storm has happened, people will go and do what's called a damage assessment survey. And then based on what's happened to the storm, they're going to use a fancy thing called the Enhanced Fujita Scale. That's why it's EF, and get a number from 0 to 5. Almost all of the storms that produce tornadoes in the Los Angeles area will be either an EF0 or an EF1. So that's still, potentially 80, 100-mile-an-hour winds with these, and certainly enough that it can bring down trees. It can toss things, like storage sheds and things around. As we saw last year in Montebello, it lifted off segments of the roofing from that building. So yes, they happen in Los Angeles. They're probably going to be very short-lived and on the lower end of the strength scale. There's a shot of that one from Montebello just about a year ago. So if you happen to be outside, again, you're going to want to seek some kind of shelter. If you can't get to real shelter, even getting down into lower ground, like a ditch by the side of the road, might be good. Unlike the hailstorm, they don't recommend trying to ride out a tornado in your car, because your car can be picked up and sent somewhere in a pretty big collision. Ideally, you're going to seek shelter inside a building, and California doesn't have a whole lot of basements, but underground shelters are the best. If not, some kind of interior room. A lot of times this will be a bathroom, and stay away from windows is the tagline on that. Flash floods. Flash floods can and do happen around here all the time. My wife's from New England, and she doesn't understand why we have to get excited every time it rains. And I said, because it rains all the time in New England. Our soil can get much harder, and it can produce these basically all of a sudden rapid flowing water areas where before there was nothing. And that's what the flash flood danger is. In this particular picture, I'd like to draw attention, you might not have thought that that was very deep, where the car is sitting up to its windows in water. And our safety recommendation is, if you can't see the road because of the water that's on it, and generally the dirty water that's on it, don't try and cross it, because the road itself may have been washed away. And a primary way people get hurt or killed in flash floods is they'll try to cross moving water, their car gets swept away, and they get trapped somewhere like under an overpass or something. Cars can float away in less than 2 feet of water. It can sweep a car away. As little as 6 inches of water is enough to sweep you off your feet. And probably most people are familiar with going to the beach and seeing how little water it takes to actually kind of toss you around a little bit. And just like with the storms, we got to have a safety rhyme here, and turn around, don't drown. So really nothing so important that you can't try and go on another route. Turn around, give it a try, go in another direction. There's a special type of flash flood that primarily happens to areas near where we've had a fire, and the ground might be covered with ash, and the ground itself might become a little bit water repelling, kind of like after you wax your car. And that can cause what is known as a debris flow. This particular is a shot of Highway 101 after the Montecito debris flow in 2018, where it took all of the debris, all of the ash and stuff that was left over from the Thomas Fire, and a very intense line of rain went over it, only for about 15 minutes, half an hour, but it was enough to get all of this stuff flowing that came down the hill. So in most every case, we're going to tell you, hey, there's a flood coming, head to higher ground. If there's a debris flow coming, they're going to be coming from the higher ground down towards you, generally on the clearest path, like a street. So it's a little dangerous for us to say there's a warning for debris flow, because unfortunately, a lot of people's tendency is then to walk out of their house and see if they can see it by going onto the street. So the more safe thing to do would be get into a higher level of your house if you hear debris flow. Finally, wildfires. The fire itself isn't really weather, but when you talk about how fires behave, the fire behavior and analysts generally talk about the fire triangle that includes the topography. So what's the slope of the ground looking like? What are the fuels like? And to firefighters, anything that burns is fuel. And then what's the weather? So in that top left picture where you see all of those embers flying around, this is one of the particularly dangerous activities where embers can be blown more than a mile from where a fire is currently being the edge of what you would consider the fire. So these can certainly jump highways or other barriers that people think, oh, the fire can never get here. If it's a windy enough day, that can happen. And that's why our office works with the fire departments to look at the fuels and look at the weather. And on days where it's particularly dry and windy, we might issue a red flag warning, which means if a fire starts, it could spread rapidly and fighting it could be difficult. Causes of wildfires, items 1 through like 10 there, pretty much people. People doing things generally on accident, or people who built things that fail. The final one that's on there is lightning. And I know the large fire just after the Thomas Fire in Northern California was a rare lightning storm that had several strikes that all merged together into a big fire, that Mendocino Complex fire. Heat and cold certainly aren't as, dramatic and exciting as all this stuff that I've been showing you, but heat and cold unfortunately still kill people every year, especially if you are part of the unhoused community. It can be very, very hazardous if there is both cold weather and water in the forecast. So if you're hearing like less than 50 degrees and a chance of rain, that can be quite dangerous for people. Unless you're out in the mountains during the winter, we're generally not getting into areas where the wind chill is a real big effect in our area. But it can certainly cause problems even at levels high above that. Probably more damaging for our communities is the effect of heat, because a lot of people, myself included, I don't have an air conditioner because it's coastal California and I should be able to get that sea breeze in the afternoon. So on a day where we don't get the sea breeze, nature's air conditioner, and maybe we have offshore flow like is coming up with this Santa Ana event tomorrow, the temperature might go up, and then at night you don't get the recovery. Day after day of that can really have a toll on your body. And the Weather Service has started issuing something called a heat risk. It's kind of similar to an air quality index. And we'll just say what the risk is. And you can Google any of these and find them on our Weather Service products. Or if you're interested, try contact me after this and I can direct you to them. A threat that we wouldn't have thought we'd be talking about for Los Angeles, but here we are, is the threat of hurricanes. There are 4 main things that we talk about when hurricanes come, and yes, I know that's a picture of Florida, not us. But wind, storm surge, flooding rains, and tornadoes. And really, all of those we just treat the way we would treat any individual risk, except for the storm surge. And here's where we're at great advantage over Florida. We don't have a gradually sloping coast that leads to an interior that's only about 30 feet above water. We have a very rapidly rising coastline. So the storm surge threat is fairly minimal in California. So we told you about all those hazards, so you can do things to get prepared. That's what we would like. One of the main products we have, and one of the main products that people really don't understand or don't like, is when we tell you there's a watch, warning, or advisory, or an outlook. It gets very confusing for a lot of people. So think of it this way. An outlook is just, hey, we're looking out in the next 7 days, maybe we see something and we talk about it. The outlook for next week is, yeah, there's a chance of minor rain, but like next Friday or something. An advisory is if something's coming that could cause significant inconvenience. Our most common advisory are wind advisories, where we'll say, hey, there's wind coming. You might want to put down your umbrellas, bring in your garbage cans. It's probably not going to do serious harm, but it could certainly do some minor things that cause inconveniences. If it's something bigger, we're going to put out probably a warning about it. And really the main difference in a watch and warning is when it's going to happen. A watch is something that's going to happen in the fairly near future, somewhere between a couple hours to a couple of days, that could pose a threat to life or property. So, for instance, right now, we had areas of Los Angeles County under a high wind watch. We're expecting potentially destructive winds, which are more than like 50 miles an hour. As that gets closer in time, or if we see it like, hey, there's a severe thunderstorm forming over Pasadena, we'll go right into a warning. And that means it either is happening or it's going to happen very soon. And down at the bottom there, you should see, as the person receiving this, if there's a warning, you should probably be thinking of taking a protective action. So when we issue these type of products, there's two different things that you might see. Sometimes we're going to talk about a zone. We divide the county up into zones that have a fairly uniform climatology, and we might issue a product for that. For instance, I just was talking about upgrading the wind watch to a wind warning for the Santa Clarita area, so that whole zone will be changing. That's a broad, kind of long fuse product. The other thing that we do, if we see something like on the right side over there, that is a tornado as seen from radar, we draw a tiny little polygon just around the affected area, and that will trigger the emergency alert system. That will trigger things that hit your phone that say, in this area, there's something that's a warning right now. This slide says it's for wildfire safety, but really it's for any of these weather hazards. We really recommend you follow what CAL FIRE says and have a ready, set, go plan. Be ready if you start hearing about advisories. Are you set to go? Is there a watch where you might have to do something? And then once we're at warning level, or even before if you can, maybe do that go. I provided a couple tools here. If you're interested in spotting some of this own weather, you can look at weather maps or satellites or radar. All of our stuff is freely available. There are many methods to get your weather products. We don't have an app, but we do have a web page. We're weather.gov/LOX. But there are also a variety of other sources where you can see our products. And we really need you to be in on this because the best forecast in the world isn't any good unless people do something with it. If we're saying, hey, there might be a tornado, but they're still flying that airplane in that picture there, that's not so good. So what we do is we have partnerships with other federal and state, county, and city government to try and help partner with them to spread the word. There's only about 25 of us here in the office, and we are staffed 24 hours, 7 days a week. So we really need help from people to get this out. The Skywarn logo over there is people who are weather spotters trained to come in for us. We also have what are called weather ambassadors. These are communities or organizations that take our weather information and amplify it. And we've got things on there, like TV stations, all the way down to some of these are somebody with a barbershop where they just talk to their customers about weather. Walt Disney isn't one of them. But anyway, that's my 30 minutes. I'll be around for any questions and the rest of the panel. Thank you for your attention.
All right. Thank you, John. And I think I made you co-host, so if you want to turn your camera on and wave to everybody, you can. Are there any questions for John in the chat? Saw one hand raised and then unraised. So if anybody raised their hand just now, can you try re-raising it if you have a question? Okay, Eric Morgan, go ahead, Eric.
All right, thank you, Kellen. Yeah, I'm interested in the Skywarn program. Would that be an online class I could take, or would that be coming in person to a classroom setting?
Well, there's a little bit of both. There is an online class that you can go over, here are the basic weather types. We've also had people who go from our office to talk to communities, like maybe a CERT team wants everybody on the team to get qualified to do this. So they can come out and give a talk to a group. And then you fill out a form and, well, pass a test, fill out a form, and you can become one of our spotters.
All right, sir. Cool. That answers that. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Sure. I see there's also a question from Gary Singer saying, what's the most destructive atmospheric river in recent history? Wow. It really depends on how you're going to measure destruction. We did have, with this last one in Los Angeles County, I was reading the reports from LA City Emergency Management, and go ahead and correct me if I'm wrong, but there were literally hundreds of small, basically little flooding events, whether it's mud across the street or somebody's backyard being damaged. But there wasn't real significant damage with that. Most of the time with these atmospheric rivers, there is one of the dangers if it hits one of those burn scars and causes something big. I do know that last year in Northern California, they had like 4 of these back to back to back, and that got with the Oroville Dam up there. There was some problem where that dam was damaged and there was some flooding. So, and these aren't just a California phenomenon. They go all the way up the west coast of the U.S., the west coast of South America, and even over in like Portugal, you can get these. So it's a worldwide thing. California, I would say probably last year in Northern California.
All right. Appreciate the questions. Any other questions for John before we move on? Okay, well, thanks, John. Really appreciate your presentation. Excellent. We'll go ahead and move on. And apologies to Carol Parks, our general manager. I guess you can kind of give some opening remarks now. Sorry to steal your thunder. Go ahead, Carol.
No worries. Thank you, Callan, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being a part of the conversation today about adverse weather. John, that was a very good presentation. Very happy to have you as a part of our emergency management family. I've sung the praises of National Weather Service a lot lately because with our recent atmospheric river events, you all's in-person and virtual presence before, during, and after the storms has really contributed to the way in which we prepare and respond to these very different weather events. I know when I moved to California back in 1995, it was a time of very different weather from the East Coast. And then we dealt with El Nino. Then we had a long pause before we started seeing significant rain events here in LA City. So having this information is very helpful, and we would like to continue to partner with you in our planning, and especially when we do our training and our exercises, because the more we as emergency managers can understand the dynamics, the causes, and the things that could potentially happen for these weather scenarios, the better we can create messaging and inform the general public. And I do know that things are very different now than they were some years ago. You know, when I first moved out here, you didn't hear much talk about tornadoes or lightning or thunder. And so now it's very different, I'm sure, due to climate change. So we want to continue to better understand all of the terminology so that when we're out in the public making presentations and when we get questions, we can be ready to answer. So thank you again for being here. Thank you to the other presenters from our different city organizations, as well as the county and the California Department of Insurance for your participation as well. And to those of you who are in the listening audience, Please use this as an opportunity to get your questions answered because this is a great opportunity and a learning experience for us all. So thank you to Callum and others who were instrumental in pulling this together. And we look forward to working with all of you in the weeks and months and years ahead, especially have to put this plug in as we gear up for the World Cup, the Olympics, the Paralympics, and all of the other events that are on the calendar between now and 2028. Thank you again and enjoy the rest of this webinar. And I look forward to seeing each of you either in the EOC for a planned event or for the next emergency as we prepare, respond, and recover and take care of city government as well as our great city, the city of Los Angeles. Thank you. Back to you, Callum.
Thank you, Carol, for being our fearless leader, and I get chills every time you give a speech, so thank you. Let's go ahead and move on to the next presenter. We're going to go ahead and give it over to Rico Gross and Ron Landers, both captains with Los Angeles Fire Department. Go ahead.
Outstanding. Colin, thank you very much. You guys hear me okay and see the screen?
You're good, sir.
Outstanding. So first off, I just want to thank you guys. It's pretty cool to follow the Weather Service because they are instrumental. And then Captain Landers is also on, and I would like to introduce him. He is our new DOC commander, and then we'll get right into the presentation. Cap, you on?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity for Rico and I to come out and present for this webinar. It's going to be hard to follow that weather report that we just got, but go ahead and let's start it, Rico.
Agreed. Let's get this going. So adverse weather response, atmospheric river, as we just talked about from the Weather Service, there's some critical factors we want you to be resilient for, but also know how we respond and how we look at things. As we stated, myself, Captain Rico Gross, and Captain Landers. Enough about us. We're going to talk about types of weather impacts, the LAFD, and some resiliency efforts. So first off, what type of impacts can we have? And Captain Landers and I will both kind of talk about these pictures here, but rain, atmospheric weather causes our swift water problems, debris flows, floodings, thunderstorms, lions, tigers, and bears. Not to be joking, but yeah, when they start falling, it's going bad. And then we'll talk briefly about wildfires and Santa Ana's, as we have heard we're going to be starting a little bit into tomorrow. Ron, anything on these pictures you want to highlight?
No, just in coordination with all these types of incidents, we still handle approximately 1,700 calls a day while these incidents are occurring. So it's very taxing on the fire department and all of our community partners.
Critical. And I know for me, just glancing at those pictures you just saw, whether you go from that tree falling on the left to on the right, where you have our helicopter pulling someone out of the drink or the water, here we are responding to 1,600 plus calls, but we're also mitigating the effects and impacts, increased effects and impacts of the weather. And we all need to be cautious of those. Why do we need to be cautious? Because we sit in the middle of this wind channel / flood plain. It's beautiful. The climate's great when the weather's great, and when it's not, as our Weather Service presenter stated, for various factors, it can cause lots of problems. So what do we do about it? Well, in the fire department, we're preserving life and property. We're safeguarding our communities relentlessly. We do that through our planning P at all times: preparedness, prevention, response, recovery. What does that mean in simple terms? That means 24/7, we are life-saving. Whether we're running 1,600 calls, 2,000 calls, and that has happened, we're ensuring the safety of the public and making sure that we are not only prepared, but we're there during the recovery phase as well. So day to day, that is our activity. Right now in blue skies, that is our activity. We'll run 1,600 plus calls today. We'll have 600 plus transports. These are generalized numbers, but we can anticipate those already regardless of the weather. When we have the weather events, whether it's any of those conditions, we go through a decision tree. We have multiple names for them, but we are constantly looking based upon the situation and our awareness to the facts of how we are developing our 106 fire stations coordinated through our 4 geographic bureaus and our department command. And obviously I said that backwards because day to day, that's how it occurs. The fire stations are responding, mitigating the incidents, and based upon critical incident intelligence, say that 10 times fast, we are making decisions on how to best commit and achieve our mission. I'm going to fly through this, and I apologize if you need me to stop or slow down, raise a hand or throw it in the chat, and I'll do so. That being said, everything comes back to our deputy department commander. Day-to-day operations, that is our Metro Fire Communications. That's our dispatch center. Our dispatch center is, in essence, in control of our fire department and its emergency response. If there is any type of presenting factors, wind events, Santa Ana, rainstorms or weather coming in, we are getting those weather updates at all times from the Weather Service, and we're disseminating that into our field operations. And we're coming up with a greater plan of what those impacts are going to be to our individual fire stations and through the chain of command. All of those could present with a pre-deployment of resources, augmenting staffing, our Swiftwater teams being staffed or immediately available, changes to our other assets such as our helicopters or air, our heavy equipment, or even our own deployment and our relief. Meaning, if we have 3,600 employees, but only a third of them are on duty today, we could, our department command could make a decision to hold over or recall most of those staff who would be going home. So we could double and triple our available staffing resources depending on the causality or the disaster. So how do we make those decisions? This one's a very quick document, and don't take it verbatim for what's on the screen because there's a ton of other factors that come in the decision-making process. But think of this just as a template. And if those of you who are ICS nerds like myself, this is kind of your 215A, your 214A, where you're looking at tactics as how we're developing into the next few steps. And the reason I share this in this capacity, this webinar, is because it's kind of good to look at, wow, the fire department is looking at a very intensive or exhaustive thought process or checkbox to see what level of activation we might deploy. Now, that's going to look at the factors that I just mentioned. What's the causality or the disaster? What's the time of the day? What's been going on the previous few days? What's our staffing model? A lot of questions. Those questions are answered by a group of several individuals who are at the highest level of our command staff to give us a greater awareness to make a good decision. Any statements on that matrix before I keep going, Cap?
If you go back to the planning P.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
10 o'clock, just so everybody's aware, this is, we have a 10-hour, 10 o'clock AM weather conference call, which is our operations briefing. If you look at the planning P, and what this does is this basically gives us the layout of the fire department for the day, what our staffing models are looking like, if we have any augmented staffing, where that staffing is located, and what's available for the day. Scoot forward now back to that weather matrix, the Swiftwater matrix. At 1500 hours, the deputy department commander gets together another tactics meeting. If you look at the planning P, and this is what we're looking ahead for the next day or the next operational period. We're getting the weather input. We know that there's a storm coming in, or we have an obvious threat to the city. And this is where we're going to determine all this criteria off this matrix to determine what that deployment plan is gonna be for the next day. That's it.
Yeah, critical. And just to reemphasize that, we have our top 4 department commanders, our geographic bureaus, who have been designated as the department leader in coordination with all of our battalion chiefs and assistant chiefs, the next 2 levels of chief officers coming together to make these decisions based upon the facts that we're getting from our city family, our internal department capabilities, and our dispatch centers capabilities, and based on the current conditions. So really, this is happening 24/7. And then during a specific event, such as a rainstorm, we would beef it up and have those meetings like Captain Ron just mentioned. So critical points that Cap just stated. So what does this truly mean, and what are we really looking at? Well, really, we are triaging, we are treating, and we are sheltering per our mission. We are looking at the needs of the city to make sure we have the capabilities to continue in our mission. That's going to determine our resources, the area, the region, and the state, meaning if we are on a critical drawdown. So if we're running our 1,600 calls that day, but we anticipate an additional encumbrance or hit from the weather, we're now looking to our area partners, our regional and our state partners. And I won't go too much into that because it's a coordination with mutual aid agreements, automatic aid agreements, and going through even EMD, EOC, and our Emergency Operations Center, and then into our county operations center to get available resources to fulfill our needs. As you guys saw a few minutes ago, there was a picture of the Thomas Fire, the mudslides, and we were assisting in those areas because of their capabilities were exhausted. And we have that same capability from our area, state, region, and county partners. So back to that matrix and back to that staffing model, here's what it will truly look like in real time. So a decision is made by our DDC, and that decision is then filtered out to our department in a notice similar to this one that came out through the February storms. We staffed up our swift water, we increased our staffing level at fire stations, our high profile vehicles, our type 3 apparatus, which are very good for going through water inundated areas or mud inundated areas. We staffed those up. And again, those decisions are made based upon the weather and the impacts from our department heads out to our field resources. Captain Ron's position as our DOC captain is typically in charge of, and will know ahead of time if we have gotten enough provocation to activate our department operations center. Like most city departments, except for LAPD, our department operations center is not 24-hour staffed. Captain Ron is the #1 contact and commander of that DOC when it is activated. Anything else on that, Cap? Did you want to talk a second about the management teams?
Our incident management team, so we're broken up into 3 different teams. They make relief Tuesday mornings at 07:30, and their on-call status is for 1 week. The DOC team is comprised of 20 members, ranging from deputy chiefs all the way down to inspectors. It's all special duty members that hold administrative roles in the fire department. And then we also staff 12 members down in the EOC. That's it with that.
Yeah, and critical to that, and what just happened at our last storms was the trainings some of you guys have been taking, whether it's at TEACS or whether it's the EOC management class that's coming up shortly. Please jump on those because that makes our coordination and feasibility that much greater. But yeah, those teams are essential to take the burden off the field and give back to the field and the city family. So when those activations occur and our DOC becomes activated, Obviously, that is in alignment to our disaster management plans and our annexes and appendices. That is spelled out verbatim in our, I know EMD's website, and anyone can access the adverse weather annex and what are the benchmarks to our activations and really what are the steps that we are taking immediately. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because I want to keep going. Oh, it's my next slide coming up. Can you guys see that next slide? Seems like it's going through a little glitchiness with my.
Yeah, it's lagging, but we can see it.
Outstanding. So what that means is on that situational awareness or what the incident truly looks like, how many resources we have to put into it. We go into our command operations modes. I'm not going to go into that too much, but at the end of the day, we activate our incident management teams to staff up or increase staffing in the field. That's the FIMT or field management teams. And the incident management teams, I apologize for all the acronyms, but to spell those out in a PowerPoint slide would be ridiculous. And then that opens up and provides for our DOC and EOC, our Department Operations Center and our Emergency Operations Center. As Kat mentioned, and I'll fly through this one because this is the long explanation. Department Operations Center, it's a command post. It gives us the ability for our communications and dispatch to continue responding to the 911 phone calls while the Operations Center mitigates the larger incidents or one large incident. Obviously, from the rain, we have incidents throughout the entire city, and we're trying to alleviate the needs and the planning for those multiple incidents. Also, as we look in our department officer or deputy department officer or deputy department commander, we really want to look at if we have any stations that are unable to serve, that are dark or dry because they're out on an incident or they've had some type of damage, and ascertain if we need to get those other resources from the county, from the state, and how we procure those. So this slide's really looking into how we need to go outside of our area to get other resources. So inside our city family, we all know that once that EOC is up and running, it's a coordinated effort. How do we achieve our management and our management objectives to take care of our city and to get our city into a recovery mode? That's that common operating procedure. That's looking at all of our idiosyncrasies or our tasks oriented missions for our departments, our mission specific for each departments and how we come together to resolve all of the incidents or damages that we might need to take care of. So back again on our department DOC, Department Operations Center, we evaluate and prioritize. All of that information is filtered, if need be, to our EOC. So if we can't manage it underneath our command and control at our Department Operations Center, we ship it down to the EOC and task it accordingly through our operations. Everything's maintained and analyzed from local to the state. Prioritized, acquire and gather all the intelligence, and we make sure that that is timely and accurate and communicated to the public via whatever means we can per necessary. Remember, if we're putting out alerts, which we'll talk about more in a second, we're looking at more of a disaster or an immediate need to send those types of messages out. All of that's coordinated at the highest level of command. Obviously, fire, PD, and EMD to ensure we are giving consistent and accurate information and coordination throughout the city. Cap, you want to talk about the Swiftwater Ops for a sec?
Yeah, so in alignment with the operations briefing and the tactics meeting, we talked about augmented staffing, and I'm just going to go over some of the specific augmented staffing that you can see out in the field. So first thing, Swiftwater operations. We've got 4 Swiftwater teams that we can spool up. We do have them on duty every day, but then in augmented staffing, we can have them specific as Swiftwater deployments. And depending on that matrix, will determine how many teams. Be mindful, Swiftwater just doesn't happen in the channels and the waterways that we have throughout the city. As we saw with the recent February storms, with the amount of water, we had intersections that were flooded that were beyond our normal first responders capabilities. So that's a time where we can deploy Swiftwater teams into intersections, and they can use their flotation devices and boats to mitigate rescues. So it just doesn't always happen in the waterways. Next, air operations. With that matrix, we'll determine whether or not we need to add additional air assets for the day. On any given day, we have 7 helicopters, 5 Type 2s and 2 Type 3s. Not all of them are always up full operational every day due to maintenance, but that is something that we will determine whether or not we need to hire back additional air crew, pilots, or Helco officers. Next, heavy equipment. We have 4 heavy equipment operators and 1 boss. They're usually available Monday through Friday, 5:30 to 3, and they're also on call. And what they can bring to incidents are dozers, excavators, loaders, and transports. And they're also included in the weather matrix to determine whether or not we need to augment their staffing as well. Some of the capabilities they have for this recent storm is large debris removal immediate, where we have life hazards present. They can also help open up roadways for our first responders. They are a very intricate part of a wildland fire as well. And last, just a couple other specialty apparatus that we have. We've got 3 Type 3 engines, which are 4-wheel drive capability, and we can augment those and staff them throughout the city where needed. They're typically more of a wildland resource, but in the recent storms, we did deploy one of those Type 3 apparatus up into the Riverwood community where there was potential of flooding, and our normal apparatus weren't going to be able to get in and out of there. We have brush patrols that they're basically a pickup style apparatus for maneuverability. We also, I'll let Captain Gross talk about the CERT units, but then we have a crew 3 as our volunteer hand crew, comprised of individuals that are trying to get into the fire service. And with a rain event like we had, we can utilize them. We can order them up and utilize them for assisting with evacuation. We can also use it for debris removal and just assisting our fire apparatus and members throughout the city. You want to talk about the CERT?
Yeah, great, Cap. Thank you. And the CERT units, so everyone knows, we have 5 vehicles staged strategically throughout the city that typically will respond to an incident and augment the fire department, either relieving them so they maintain security and safety on scene. But in the event of a rainstorm or other, they're really helping out with logistics. They're helping out with bringing things to the scene, whether it's supplies for the family, supplies for the fire department, or if they're not responding, being our eyes and ears, being that situational awareness to a street corner, providing information to the public stating, it looks like it's more than ankle deep, please do not go in there. And again, the CERT units are our force multipliers, and we have several units and then a couple, almost nearly 100 of our volunteers out there that we can deploy at any time. We've also sent them to other areas such as like San Bernardino during the winter storms, and to Long Beach when they had some flooding down there. Great resource and great value.
The last specialty apparatus that we can utilize, probably one of the newer piece of equipment that we have in the fire department over the last couple of years is our UAS, our unmanned aircraft systems, aka drones. They're very feasible when ordered early. They do need to get clearance to fly, so if our incident commanders feel a need, we always recommend that they get them ordered early. Some of the incidents that we would utilize them on, swift water incidents, we can deploy drones during heavy rains where we're unable to put firefighters out ahead of where we might have a swift water incident, and we can get situational awareness from up above. They were also recently used during the February storms during road closures when we couldn't get apparatus, and they were used to assess debris flows and property damage. And actually this morning with the debris flow that occurred in the Hollywood Hills or in Sherman Oaks this morning, they were actually deployed to go up and assist with infrared spotting for looking for any victims.
Sorry about the little glitchiness here, folks. Just pulling up the next slide. It's amazing how valuable those assets are during those storms, and whether it's inclement weather or not, how they can be utilized. So we really want to move into the next piece, which is the resiliency to the public and what others can do to prepare. My apologies. Give me 1 second. There we go. So our LAFD CERT and our LAFD preparedness, as our weather presenter stated, National Weather Service, excuse me, stated earlier, we have the Ready, Set, Go. We run a similar, if not the exact same program. It can be accessed on lafd.org. Our CERT-LA has a lot of resilience items on there, and really prepares the public and even us as first responders to be enhanced and greater prepared. EMD has a Ryland program. I won't go into that too much, still their thunder, but I know LAPD and Recreation and Park, I present their products as much as possible to make sure we can provide for the community as best as possible. Because we know the more prepared we can be, the better the public is self-resilient. Really quickly, as far as emergency alerts, we know that in those alerts, some of them you have to sign up for. If you have some of the newer phones, you have to make sure they're capable and they're turned on. Please visit some of the emergency alerting websites and look into that if you're wanting to know if your phone is active. The middle of this page has a disaster preparedness book that our department disseminates. It's downloadable on our website as well. And again, some of our area partners are pictured in this to increase your sustainability and preparedness. For LAFD, we're really simple. We want you to be informed, have a plan, get involved, and know your resources. These are the main topics discussed inside that preparedness guidebook. That QR code will take you to the downloadable link. I'll leave it up for a second. And again, LAFD.org talks about Ready, Set, Go, evacuations, and a ton of other items to make you more prepared. These are the QR codes to both of those on the LAFD website. Again, I didn't want to take too much time during the presentation, but I would encourage everyone to take a look at them, whether it's the alerting or the Ready, Set, Go program, to be prepared and to be more resilient. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. Cap, did you have anything else before we close it out?
No, that's it. Hopefully,
Yeah.
we conveyed what the fire department does during these adverse weather events, and just wanted to really emphasize that our men and women of the fire department are still running all the calls on a day-to-day basis in addition to these responses. And we do, I failed to mention on the operational periods, we do operate under 24-hour operational periods as well, unless it's specifically changed through the incident commander or the DDC.
Yes, sir. If anyone needs at any time, those are both of our contact information for questions or other. But Colin, we'll give it back to you and open it up for questions. Or we hold them to the end for questions.
All right. Any questions for Captain Gross or Captain Landers in the chat? Go ahead, John.
Yeah.
Hi, I just wondered, after an event, when you're not using the UAS, if the Weather Service wanted to use that asset for some kind of damage assessment, would that be possible? And if so, who do we call?
I think you can reach out to both Cap and I, and we'll get you that information. I pretty much
Okay.
already know the answer is yes, because you guys are our best friends and you always take care of us. But as far as the specific parameters, we can put you in contact to the exact person to discuss.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. It was great.
Thanks.
Touching on that UAS capability, I also wanted to talk about how we used that in this last month's storm to allow the Bureau of Engineering to get an assessment on Mulholland road closures. So that was definitely a cool new addition to our arsenal, I think.
Yeah, that made a huge difference on situational awareness, Colin. I'm glad you mentioned that. Thank you.
All right. Well, seeing no other questions, I just want to thank you again, Captain Gross, Captain Landers. Excellent presentation as always. Appreciate you being here. And we'll go ahead and move on to our next presenter. Next presenter is going to be from the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. Keith Garcia is an emergency management coordinator there. And go ahead and take it away, Keith.
All right. Now, number one, can you hear me okay?
Sorry, Keith. You might have lagged out. Try talking again.
Oh, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. You're a little low.
Okay. I'm gonna, do I need to, are you sending me a sharing or,
Yeah, we made you co-host. You should be able to share your screen.
okay. Let's see. Okay. And share. And is my screen coming through? Okay. And
Yep,
folks, okay. Thank you very much, folks, for our invitation today. I'm Keith Garcia. I'm with LA Department of Water and Power. We're in a group called Office of Emergency Management. And recently we were, and I'm trying to move my screen, my picture here. There we go. Recently we were part of LADWP's Security Services Group. We have moved over to Corporate Health and Safety. And as you can see there, we're one of the parts of Corporate Health and Safety, Office of Emergency Management, 5 people, but we're supported by, as you can see there, COVID-19 Resource Office, and we work with the other aspects of corporate health and safety, industrial hygiene, our occupational health, our nurses and doctors, workers' comp, pressure vessels, and even our administrative services group. And water-wise, we have to bring water in. And as you can see there, and the map itself got kind of cut off a little bit. If you go to Google and you put in the words LADWP briefing book, there is a PDF book that is fantastic. We revise it every year. It's available to everyone. And these pieces of information you'll see on this slide and the next slide are in those books, but you can see that our water needs to be brought in from different areas. For example, up by Sacramento, through the State Water Project, Sierra Nevada Mountains, the LA Aqueduct, Colorado River Aqueduct. And we have to do that. There's just not enough here, groundwater wise or in other means, to be able to meet the needs, the water needs of all the people of the city of Los Angeles. And there's some numbers there that we threw in In terms of our infrastructure, tanks and reservoirs, pump stations, these things are what can be hit if we get way too much rain, just like recently in the last couple of weeks. And one thing I want to point out is towards the bottom, you'll see 61,000 fire hydrants. We're responsible for them and making sure they are pressurized all the time. These are our power infrastructures. And we bring in a lot of power from not only from other parts of California, but even up into Oregon, Utah, and other parts of the Western United States. We need to do that. And one of the reasons we need to do that is we have to start looking at alternate ways of generating power. You can see there's some things like thermal plants, small hydroelectric, wind plants, and solar. We have to, get away from the thermal at some point. We also have some numbers there for transmission and also distribution. Generating is creating the power, transmission is bringing it here, and distribution is getting it out there to the neighborhoods, to each house. So there's numbers there. Again, these are from the briefing book, and if you want to get that, you're free to. Now, planning and intelligence, how do we know adverse weather is coming? What we do here in OEM is we subscribe into a couple of products from National Weather Service. So NWSLA, what happens is that comes in and we divert it to over 350 employees who need to know what's coming up weather-wise in LA. For Owens Valley, we have a lot of infrastructure up there. We have a lot of employees up there. And so we also subscribe to National Weather Service Reno and National Weather Service Las Vegas. Reno is for Mono County. Las Vegas is for Inyo County for the most part, not specifically exactly, but that's pretty much what they handle. And we send those out to 14 of our employees up there in Owens Valley so that they know what's coming up, like heavy winds. Weather triggers, what are we looking for? We want to see mention in those National Weather Service products. We want to look at mentions of high winds, heavy rain, lightning, flooding, snow, blizzards. We did have a blizzard warning last week, I think it was, up in Owens Valley. Cold, ice, and of course, high heat. And impacts on the water system. For example, a power outage, even though that's an outage of power, can impact water infrastructure operation. What it does is it turns off the mechanical aspects of how water is brought to the city, water pumping and so on. There can also be mudslides, debris flows, dam erosion, and reservoir seepage just from heavy rains. For power impacts, we've got outages, of course, and we can go pretty high on outages. I've seen us go to 140,000 pretty quickly. And that was from high heat from a transformer explosion. But we got that back down within 24 hours. Our substations, which are there to bring that power all the way from where it's generated all the way down to the home itself, to the business itself. There's flooding and pumping. These recent rains did that. We had to make sure that the pumping aspect of those substations was working immediately. But then, of course, we get trees down, wires down. If you see wires down, back off as far as you can and call 911. Erosion of soil at the pole. We've seen that with Mulholland recently and even last year with Hillary. And there's, of course, lockouts and grounds, faults, slaps, trips, and surges. That's basically when our circuitry just says, hey, I've had enough, throws up its hands. It just happens. You get winds, you get rain, you get a mix of them, and that's what happens. And of course, high power demand during the summer. Road impacts, we have closures. Excuse me for 1 second. debris flow, potholes, collisions. If we can't get there, we can't do the service that's required. So we've seen that more so with the highways up in Owens Valley. They get closed because of the impact of the weather. And we have to wait until our folks, our line crews, are safe or can safely get to the destination. Other triggers and impacts. Now, you know, we talk about weather and all these other things, earthquakes and eclipse, animals climbing on lines, planned outages where we do have to repair stuff every so often, boil water notices, terrorism, Mylar balloons, vehicle collisions where we have people hitting the corner too fast and taking down a pole, theft of power we see quite often, where people are tapping into a power pole for their own purposes. And digging we really have to watch out for. If you know people who are digging in their yard, if you're going to ask them, please call 811 so they can do it safely. Now, we get to coordination calls. So our National Weather Service products describing possible negative impacts. And OEM, our Office of Emergency Management, schedules one or more coordination calls with both power and water managers and senior management. National Weather Service is always invited. They are incredible. I'm surprised they don't yell at us quite often. You know, they're great and they bring a lot of knowledge to the table. Is there a need to increase staffing? Probably. Disseminating safety guidance to employees. We send out management bulletins to let our employees know what's coming up. So even if they're not involved in our DOC process, as we'll talk about in a second, they know what to do in case that rain's going to hit hard or whatever the situation is. Is there a need to activate our DOC? We're doing that. We did that with Hillary. We did that with early February. We want to do it a lot more. Is there a request from Emergency Management Department or from the EOC? Do we need to staff our utility pod at the EOC, the utility branch director, the power and water unit leaders? And also, like we saw just a couple of weeks ago, we had our PIOs there for the Joint Information Center. So do we need to put people there as well, as in addition to the DOC? Coordination calls can continue through our DOC activation every couple of hours while that DOC is activated. And the calls can continue even after we deactivate the DOC. And that's our DOC. It's, well, it's a big room, but it works. You know, it's got a big table, a lot of chairs, a couple of screens, and it works really well. And the best part is you got people close enough that you can talk to each other and start asking the right questions and figuring out what resources need to be activated. So it's a coordination point for our response activities during major incidents, and we could use it during planned events as well. Agency resources, facilities, field response, all those things can be discussed. Situational updates, the EOC utility pod again, and our PIO at the JIC, and various department subject matter experts and specialized resources that may be needed for field operations. We're lucky. You know, there's a lot of people out there who know a lot about pretty much every aspect of DWP. So we can put our hands in them and start asking them the right questions. And of course, it's maintaining dialogue and cooperation during large-scale incidents, assisting field personnel in maintaining the safety of city residents, businesses, and our employees. Safety is number one here. It's not just a statement we make. We really go through with it. So DWP response, we have a 24/7 group called Electric Trouble. They're the guys that if something happens, if a circuit goes out in the city, if we have outages, they're the guys that are moving on it. 24/7, 365. Same thing with water trouble. They're the ones that are going to focus on any impact to water system infrastructure. The control gorge is like electric trouble, but it's up in Owens Valley. And it takes care of our infrastructure up in that area. And any of these can be augmented by district crews, which means not electric trouble crews, but our regular district line crews. We can also reach out to mutual assistance. We have signature partnerships with multiple industry groups, Southern California Public Power Authority, Western Energy Institute, American Public Power Authority, you name it. There's a lot of them, and that's just the power side. There's water side agencies we work with, like Las Vegas, the Las Vegas Water Department, and so on, who can be mutual assistance for us. And we have a priority for critical infrastructure. So as soon as we start turning circuits back on, there's a priority for meeting the needs of police, fire, and hospitals as soon as possible. After action reports, we have a lead role in this department in assembling and publishing an after action report. We have to ensure we got everyone's input. We have to describe what happened in general and add what were our goals and objectives. And we have got to be truthful. Did we meet those goals and objectives? Did anything get in the way? And the recommendations that we need to put in that report to understand what we need to do differently next time, or what do we need to change right now? So did we keep our customers informed during the rainstorms? We try as hard to do that. We have a main public page, ledwp.com. We have a series of phone numbers, as you can see up here, for our hearing customers, for our non-hearing customers, our commercial customers, and our folks out in Owens Valley. And they can use our website to check on or report power outages. They can also subscribe for outage alerts. So they can do that through our website. Now, any questions? I know that was really fast, but any questions from the folks out there?
All right, Keith, there was a question from the beginning of the presentation, I believe. What is the name of the book that you mentioned at the beginning?
Let's see. Was that? Oh, this one?
I don't see
So was it? Oh, let's see. Not sure about names.
Okay, so John said it was a briefing booklet, so, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. So this page, infrastructure water, and this infrastructure power, these are both from what is titled the LEDWP briefing book. And the easiest way I get to it is by going through like a Google search and just putting in LEDWP briefing book. It'll lead you to the actual page on our website that has the briefing book. It's a PDF, and it's got just tons of information about us, like these stats and these maps and so on. It also talks a lot about the bigger, more current projects that we're undertaking. If you have any kind of issue finding it, and I forgot to put my number on here, but I have no issue if anybody on the call calls me at 213-367-4155. That's me. I'm here Monday through Friday. And just give me a call if you're having trouble finding that.
All right. Any other questions for Keith?
If you think of something later, use that phone number.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Keith. Greatly appreciate the excellent presentation. We're going to go ahead and move on to a break. I know we just had 3 fairly big presentations, and I'll tell you right now, the next 3 that we have are a bit shorter. So after this break, I think it's going to speed along pretty quickly, and we'll go ahead and reconvene at 2:45. Thanks, everybody. All right. It is 2:45. Let's go ahead and keep this moving. I appreciate everybody hanging around. We do have some really great presentations for the second half of this webinar, and I'm looking forward to it. So let me go ahead and introduce Lonnie. And I apologize, Lonnie, if you want to just pronounce your last name for me. Lonnie's from LA County Public Works, and she's going to do a presentation on mud and debris flow phase forecasting.
Hi, it's Lonnie Ezel is the last name. So just 1 second, and I'm trying to see if my screen is going to work for the presentation part. All right, am I good to go?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. Hi. So I'm Lonnie Ezel, and I'm a disaster services specialist for LA County Public Works. And I'm going to provide you with some information on our mud and debris flow forecasting. And just to kind of give you an idea, when you hear a phase forecast being called, what that means and what it entails for us to make that determination. And please, if you have any questions, just stop me and let me know. So the intent of doing the mud and debris flow forecast is exactly for this reason. So this is following the 2009 station fire. This is in La Cañada, Flint Ridge. This is in January of 2010. We had a situation where we had a boulder that was not seen before a rain event that came down, and it actually plugged our debris basin and caused mud and debris flows to impact Ocean View Boulevard and the homes that reside along that pathway. We were super fortunate that it did not, we did not lose any lives in this, but as you can see, just in this one home that was impacted, that it caused tremendous damage from that debris flow event. A lot of, people, rightly so, remember what happened in Montecito following the Thomas fire, during the Woolsey fire in 2018. We had storms that happened almost immediately after the fire had stopped, was contained. And so we were in full mode to ensure that we were not going to have a debris flow event that tragically would take any lives. It's not just the lives, it's the property damage. We had many homes and vehicles that were parked on the street that ended up at the bottom of the canyon. And so that is what we're trying to avoid from happening. So what we do after there's been a significant burn, and that's typically anything that's over 10 acres. We have the Owen fire, which is up in Topanga. That was a small 16-acre fire, but the impacts were a lot more. And so following that fire, what we'll do is we map out what from LA County Fire, LAFD, depends on where the fire is, could also be the National Forest Service, that we will get the perimeter map of that fire. What we are particularly looking at is the watershed that's been impacted. So basically all of the natural pathways of where that flow would come down. So this is from the Fish Fire. This was 35 acres that were burned. We look at the total acreage of that watershed. So in this case, we had 35 acres burned out of a 54 acres of watershed. And so 65% of that was burned. So we use a ratio of the burned area to the unburned area of the watershed, and then that will give us what that debris flow potential would be during a design storm. And what we mean by a design storm is that's typically a 50-year event. And keeping in mind that that does not mean that it is only a one chance in 50 years that that would happen. It's all based on the amount of rain. So you'll hear like 100-year event. That doesn't mean once every 100 years. It means that in this particular situation that it could happen at 100% or 100 times. So that's, there's people often think, oh, well, this wouldn't happen for another 100 years or another 50 years. That is not how that is defined. So, and if you can see in this, so we're looking at approximately 16,730 cubic yards of material that would come down that watershed. And you can see this blue arrow here that would bring it down into the community, which again, we're trying to avoid, impacting. So what we do, actually, I'll go back real quick before I tell you about the map. So, once the burn areas occurred, for instance, this is for the fish fire in the city of Doherty, same thing with the city of LA for the land fire. We will get permission from the city to go into the burned watershed area, and we actually do a physical reconnaissance looking to see how deeply that fire burned, and then also just to get measurements. We also use topography, the latest topography. We also use LiDAR, which is a photography, system that we can use to take kind of like a survey of the area for the mapping purposes. So there's a lot of tools that we can use to identify like how much debris. Now, keeping in mind, these are all estimates because without actually kind of, digging up into that watershed area, these are calculated estimates, but as with everything, Mother Nature and our planet have a way of surprising us, as we saw in 2010 with the boulder that came down and impacted our debris basin. So moving into our debris flow phase maps. So to understand the impacts, we need to understand the debris potential and its path of where we think that the flows would go. So phase maps are prepared to identify critical locations of potential debris impacts within or below the burned areas for a variety of storm magnitudes. So a phase 1 map illustrates the expected debris flow path with a forecast of rain equal to 25% of a design storm, which again, in this we use for a 50-year frequency for a 24-hour rainfall amount. And then phase 2 shows the debris flow path for forecasts between 25 to 75% of a design storm. And then a phase 3 covers the 75 to 100% of the design storm. So this picture shows you all 3 phases and the path of the debris flow. So the green phase, which is this line here, is phase 1. So this is closest to the impact. And then at phase 1, this is kind of where we think in that rain event that the flow would pretty much stop. And then phase 2, which is your yellow, and it will go down into past the, phase green into almost hitting red. And then phase 3 is the red that will go all the way where we have a full rain event that could impact the entire area that we have mapped out that could be impacted. Now there's 2 different impact scenarios. The impact could be access only. So as you can see on the hashtagging that's on this map, which I know is pretty small for you to see, but it's not showing that the direct impact would be to any of the homes. It would just be the access impacted to those homes. So same with the yellow and then again with the red. So in this, we're not seeing any direct impacts except for here with the school that's down below, that there could be impacts that would hit the school. So during rain events, the city of Duarte will go ahead and they will close this Mill Canyon Road based on our phase forecasting, and then they will determine how long it will be. They will also put into play that no trash cans, no parked vehicles will be allowed on Mill Canyon. They work closely with this elementary school to ensure that they are aware of the closure and we're now on year almost to year 3 with the fish fire. So it's a 5-year recovery. So then after these next couple of years, they may lessen going to the higher kind of what they're going to do just based on the recovery of that watershed. After we have done the mapping, then we actually have engineering advice staff that will go out to each of these constituents here, and they will provide them with a packet of information and also letting them know what their potential threat is from the mud and debris flow forecast. So it could be advising them that they need to install diversion material, such as putting up a not really fencing, but it could just be to deflect the flows from hitting their property. But everything has to kind of be coordinated, because you certainly do not want to set up a sandbags or any type of closing off your driveway to keep the flows moving down into the streets, which is where we really want it to flow, but you don't want to impact your neighbors. So everything has to kind of be done. We don't do the actual work on the private properties. That is, the responsibility of the homeowners or of the property owners, but we can give engineering advice. We will tell them if they should evacuate. Anytime there's a rainstorm, that information is also provided to each of those homeowners. If they're not at home when we go by, then we leave that packet there. And then we will also provide the information to the local fire and also law enforcement. All of this information, including the mapping, is also shared with our first responder agencies so that they are fully aware. It is also available on our internet site that you can see the maps for each of the fires and their years of when they occurred, and then the recovery also. So we use like I said, a computer model that uses the latest topography and the volume of debris to calculate the path. Okay, so now what we do when we're moving into the actual forecast, and is based upon a review of the watershed conditions and then the weather forecast. So for us, when it's the first storm of the year, we're not as concerned because our watershed is typically very dry. And that first, it's not to say that we couldn't have some issues, but it's a little bit better than if we are now in March and we're on a more saturated watershed. So that plays into that phase forecasting also, of what we're kind of looking at as far as the watershed conditions go. How much recovery have we had plays into that, and then also the weather forecast. So the last 2 storms that we've had a no phase because we have not met the threshold of a USGS debris event. So they have been a no phase. Now, a no phase does not mean that there can't be some minor debris flows, but the impacts are not going to be as high. Also, important to note that a no phase does not mean that we're not going to have rain. And no phase is just meaning that it's a smaller amount that's going to impact that watershed condition. So as we discussed before, debris and mud flows are highly unpredictable events. And the purpose of the debris flow forecast is to provide emergency response agencies and the public with an assessment of the magnitude of that potential debris flows that are associated with the forecasted storms. And we, our official, weather forecaster is the National Weather Service. We have many calls during a storm event, leading up to before we issue that forecast, just to ensure that we are all on the same page as far as what the watershed looks like and the impact of the storm, so that we can go forward to issuing a phase forecast. So those phase forecasts are put out anywhere between 24 to 48 hours. The reason why is that we want to make sure that we are the closest and the tightest that we can be to that weather forecast. You know, as we all know, those forecasts change very quickly. So we want to make sure that we have the latest information. And then we have an e-notify system, so that we, as soon as that phase forecast has been issued, then it can go out. And if you, in my next slide or so, I'll show you how you can register. It's open to the public to register, but we highly recommend that all response agencies are signed up to receive the e-notify debris flow phase forecast notifications. So a phase forecast for a phase 1 is expected to impact smaller structures, streets, and other infrastructure which may be flooded or blocked. So you'll see the newer storms will often, the newer burn areas will often have a phase 1 at a moderate to significant storm events, just because they're the freshest. So we can have small isolated debris and mud flows possible at infrastructure locations. Streets may be flooded or blocked by debris, and then a few structures may be endangered. For phase 2, we're looking at a more significant weather forecast, which is moderate, which would impact that watershed. So we have moderate debris and mud flows possible at more widespread locations. The streets may be completely blocked by debris, and some structures may be endangered. And then phase 3, which we did initiate a phase 3 forecast for the February 3rd storms. This potential exists for significant debris and mud flows to be widespread over specific areas. Streets may be blocked, and many structures could be endangered by debris flows. And so phase 3 is based on our worst case of rainfall causing debris flows equivalent to a debris design event. So here's what the debris and mud flow forecasts look like on the web page. Like we said, that all of the fires are listed on there. They're each analyzed separately by what year, what the date of the fire was, and then also the amount of acreage burned, how great that recovery is. But this is how you will see the on the web page. Now, for any of the fires that are a phase 2 or higher, then on the county side, we have a storm preparedness operations call with first responders, and then also with our partner agencies that would be supporting if we were calling for evacuations or things like that. So we have predominantly kept that pretty much for those unincorporated areas, and also for the cities that contract with fire and sheriff. However, we did include for our last spot call, the land fire, just so that there was situational awareness that was provided for the city of LA, so that there was understanding kind of what the county was doing. We have also done that in the past for the La Tuna fire, because the La Tuna fire impacted multiple jurisdictions, LA City, Glendale, Burbank, also some county areas. So we had what we call these spot calls, where it's just a real quick situational awareness call. There's no tactics talked about. It's just coordination of what everyone is doing. This is super important also just to ensure that we are presenting a one voice message so that everybody's on the same page. It also becomes super critical when we're talking about evacuations so that there's understanding of it may just be in one burn area that we are calling for evacuations, and in it, so that there's not confusion for the public on where those evacuations are occurring. This can also be found on the Ready LA County website. When we do have a storm event, then they will put the information on the phase forecasting on that. So just lastly, I wanted to provide you with the ways that you can sign up for eNotify for the LA County Public Works mud flow forecast. So here is the website, and Kellen has a copy of the presentation. So if you want to send out this last slide just to make sure that everybody has it, but if you go to our website, you click on eNotify and then you sign up at login, and then you would just check your email for future e-notifications. Keep in mind that the web, I'm sorry, that if there is a no phase, or the last phase that was issued, phase forecast that was issued, will remain on the website. So it's not that you have missed something or it's not working. It is just that is the last time that we have issued a phase forecast. So actually the last issuance that we had was on March 6th for our no phase. So that concludes my presentation. If there are any questions, happy to answer them. Stop sharing my screen.
All right, any questions for Lonnie? And again, so this is going to be posted on YouTube, the whole recording. Everybody will have access to that. I will share that YouTube channel with you all afterwards. And then you all have my email, so feel free to email me if you would like any slides, including that slide that Lonnie mentioned, and I'll send that over to you. So Lonnie, thank you so much. Excellent presentation. I appreciate you being here.
Of course, thank you so much. Happy to provide this information anytime.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on now to Julia Juarez, who is with the California Department of Insurance, and a big outcome from these recent storms was a lot of questions about insurance coverage, and we are excited to have Julia here to talk about insurance and any issues related to insurance as a result of incidents like these storms. So go ahead, Julia.
Thank you very much, Kellen. And let me share my screen. It is a pleasure to be here with all of you. I am delighted to join you with the California Department of Insurance. I just want to, so my name is Julia Juarez, Deputy Commissioner for Community Relations and Outreach. I want to go over just the insurance market as it is right now, because we have heard from a lot of people having issues with insurance as a whole, and what you need to be aware of, and what the Department of Insurance is doing and how you can get assistance. We have seen that natural disasters and global inflation are creating stress on insurance markets. It is not just happening here in California, but every state is experiencing these. We have seen the increased costs in rebuilding, labor shortages, and insurance for insurance companies, which is reinsurance, is very difficult to find and a lot costlier. So as what we have seen is that as the risk increases, insurance companies are protecting their obligations to current consumers, making sure that they are able to cover their costs. And so because of that, they are limiting new business as a whole. What we have seen is that the top, even though there are over 100 companies that sell insurance here in the state, the top 12 companies, which all of us have heard of, all of us have seen commercials for, are very much so the ones that have 85% of the homeowners, the state's homeowners market. So it is, everything is changing quickly. So because of that, since 2022, 7 of the top 12 insurance groups have paused or restricted new business despite rate increases approved or pending with the Department of Insurance. So clearly the problem that we are hearing and understanding is that it is a lot more complex and in global in nature. So all of that is affecting us here at home. What you will see in this slide is that of the 12 insurance companies, 7 of them, the top 12, 7 of them have paused or restricted their new policies, even though they have they either have pending or approved rate increases. So, if you hear from people saying, oh, it's because California is not allowing them to charge what they need, you will see here that increases have been either approved or are pending, but it is a lot more complex than that. We see that over the past 10 years, insurance companies here in California have done worse than anywhere else in the country, even though California is the biggest insurance market in the country and in the world. We're only second to China. Really, during the last 10 years, California has experienced 9 of the 10 most devastating wildfires in our state's history. So because of that, we are faced with the tough questions that, if insurance companies, are not going to be able to cover them, can consumers get insurance? And so right now, in many areas, the answer is no, because of the impacts of climate change. We have seen that, that has been accelerating. And so we do need to take action to expand insurance availability. So the FAIR Plan was created in the 60s during the Watts riots, as because no one wanted to sell insurance to South Los Angeles, where the Watts riots were at. And so we have, that was supposed to be only a stopgap while people found insurance. Right now, we have seen that in many areas, the FAIR Plan is the only insurance available to them. And so the FAIR Plan has increased, it has tremendously, since Commissioner, took office, Commissioner Lara took office in 2019. We have been monitoring and analyzing the status and the directions of availability trends. And we have seen that, that the FAIR Plan is absolutely just increasing to levels that are not going to be sustainable. So it's also important for people to know that the FAIR Plan is not a state agency. It's run and funded by the insurance companies. And so they are, they are responsible for it as well. And so a growing FAIR Plan is a problem, because FAIR Plan policyholders are required to pay more and they get a lot less coverage. And those, and the FAIR Plan is actually concentrating the highest risk properties, making the increases, the increase in the FAIR Plan, unable to move forward after a catastrophic disaster. So it's really important to understand this point, that if the FAIR Plan goes insolvent, insurance companies are on the hook for the unpaid FAIR Plan losses. So it has never happened. It has happened, it hasn't happened in nearly 30 years. But the uncertainty is still, driving insurance further to limit coverage to Californians at risk. So that is, the FAIR Plan is creating a risk for the entire insurance market. So as a direct result of that, we are, we have seen that AM Best has downgraded the outlooks for the top 12 companies, for some of the top 12 companies like State Farm, AAA, and Mercury. And that is really important for us to know, because unlike public utilities that are required to provide coverage for all residents and businesses, under Proposition 103, insurance companies can legally refuse to write insurance unless they are able to meet 100% of consumers' claims, cover their expenses, and then also earn a fair return for for their brokers and agents. So everyone is harmed if an insurance company goes insolvent because it can't pay its claims. So we want to make sure that that does not happen. So those have been some of the issues that that we have seen as insurance companies. That is why insurance companies are not writing in many high-risk areas. And then, of course, our rate filings are a lot more complex, so they do take longer. And then because of Prop 103, one entity can truly prolong the rate filings, and that nobody else has. In regards to flood insurance, I want to be able to, to address this. Typical home insurance does not cover flooding. So you do need to purchase flood insurance separately. Now, it is important to understand that flooding has happened in every single county in the state at one point or another. So it is important for you to look at your, what insurance you have and make sure that you are able to purchase flood, specifically flood insurance. Vehicles are covered for flood damage under comprehensive policies. So if you have liability only, then of course it won't be. But if you do have a comprehensive policy and your car is, is damaged in any way, it is covered for that. Now, homes are also covered for tree damage or roof damage or mold after a flood. Now, auto insurance is we have. I want to make sure that that I address this as well, because we have heard from people who have said that there are some applications right now that are people are not able to get insurance, and so in some places. The tactics are just making people wait very long periods of times, or putting together some really confusing questionnaires. So the commissioner did issue a bulletin putting insurance companies on notice that is unacceptable. If you are having any type of trouble with getting insurance for auto, please contact the Department of Insurance and let us know what those issues are. We are, in California, if you are a good driver, you should be able to get insurance with no problem. We also have now, if you cannot afford insurance, we do have the California Low-Cost Auto Program available, and that is a state program. And you can find information at mylowcostauto.com. And that is only for liability insurance. However, it is at a much lower rate of insurance. Now, what we have heard from people, from insurance companies, is that the risk is too high in California, and so Commissioner Lara worked with all of the wildfire agencies to reduce the risk of major losses in the industry. So created the Safer from Wildfires framework, and basically it is a 3-step system that will protect your home, your surroundings, and your community. And in turn, it provides consumers with discounts and transparency also about your risk score. So under this regulation, we expect that more businesses and homeowners and communities will do more to invest in wildfire safety, and that will in turn create greater community resilience and reduce losses from wildfires. And so it is important that we are that you're able to do to understand what those things are, so that you can have an accurate insurance as well for yourself. So what we see as part of the Safer from Wildfire framework is basically protecting your home or business. So there are very specific things that you can do to ensure that your home is safer. And so, just listed them here. But it is specific for your home or your business. Then we protect the immediate surroundings. So making sure that we are not that you are, that there's clear vegetation or debris, and that you have that it's clear around you. And then finally, neighborhoods can form fire-wise communities or fire risk reduction communities. And what those are, it's basically important to see, if there is a home down the street that catches on fire because of embers, because of wind and all of that, easily, your home can catch on fire too. So the idea of this is very much so engaging your local community in the same, in cleaning up their home and making sure that everyone is following those same rules. And as you do that, then the expectation is that you would be receiving a discount on that. So that would allow you to, show the insurance company that your home is safe. Now, as I mentioned, the FAIR Plan is doing a lot of business in the state now. The FAIR Plan is already offering those discounts. And so those, they are in compliance with the regulation. And so you will be able to receive your discounts for doing that. The FAIR Plan is offering $20 million coverage for policies that are, for businesses, but also for HOAs. We have heard HOAs come to the department saying that they are having a hard time finding insurance as well. And so the FAIR Plan is offering up to $20 million coverage. That is, that has increased tremendously from previous years. In the last 20 years or so, before Commissioner Ricardo Lara came on board, we did not see an increase in that. The actual FAIR Plan was only offering $3 million for commercial policies. So we did increase that to $7 million, and now we're increasing that to 20 million, understanding that California needs, California homes and businesses and HOAs do need a lot more insurance than is available. Part of this also is that you can ask your insurance what your wildfire risk score was, because many insurance companies have been coming to consumers and telling them that their wildfire risk score is too high, and that is why they're going to either increase their policies by a tremendous amount or get rid of the policies altogether. In the past, when you would ask them what your wildfire risk score was, they would say, we can't share that because that is proprietary information for each of the insurance companies. And not even the Department of Insurance could find out what that was. So what we are doing now is we are making it available for you. So you are able to actually look at that, ask for what it is, look at that, and appeal your risk score according to what you have done. If you have done work to make sure that you're safer, now you are able to do that. You are able to request request an appeal. Request the information and appeal it. Now, it's important to understand that we are not starting from scratch. These actions build on changes the commissioner has made since 2019, just moving in the direction of a more modern and resilient market. We have moved forward on wildfire actions and are responding to climate change like never before. We are proud the department is leading in this way for our state and the nation at this point. Because there are many things that we need to address around climate and sustainability. So we do have a branch that is very specifically working on this and continues to work not only with insurance companies and other insurance commissioners throughout the country, but also with the United Nations, trying to understand what it is that we need to do to ensure that we, as consumers, are able to access insurance. So part of that is we are working on the making insurance accessible, making the market itself resilient, and then of course protecting consumers from climate change. So the commissioner in September introduced the California Sustainable Insurance Strategy. And so what that is going to be requiring insurance companies to write at least 85% of those homes and those businesses that are in distressed areas. So we are identifying what those areas are and where we have the most amount of people in the FAIR Plan. So the expectation is then that those people who are doing the Safer from Wildfires regulations, that they are actually making sure that their risk is not as high, that those folks are the first ones to be able to get out of the FAIR Plan and into the general market. Then, of course, we're also working with insurance companies in regards to catastrophic modeling. And so those working with that, those models will recognize that whatever it is that you have done to clean up your home, to make sure that you're safer, that those are taken into account when they are looking into your property. Right now, insurance companies may have, just gotten rid of full, zip codes. And so at this point, what this catastrophe modeling will do is make sure that you are being charged the appropriate rates, that the discounts are being taken into account, and that and that the whole process for how do we ensure that you're getting what you need to be getting from the insurance company is there. So we are working on that, and this week we will actually be showcasing some of that already that we have been working on. The other part of that is making sure that if we, insurance companies are having a very hard time with purchasing insurance themselves. In the past, when insurance companies purchased insurance, there was never an issue because they never needed it. Right now, because of all of the losses that we have seen in the state and throughout the country and throughout the world, really, reinsurance has become extraordinarily difficult to either purchase or just the market itself is extremely volatile, going up and down in rates very quickly and it's very disruptive. So what insurance companies are asking is, how can we make sure California will, allow them to use reinsurance for their policies as well? We, as a state, do not allow them to use that. And so the commissioner is actually in Bermuda meeting with reinsurance companies, making sure that we figure out ways to protect consumers, so that it is, if Californians are going to be paying for any type of reinsurance, it's going to have to be because it is only California, California risk. And so that is what Commissioner Lara is working on. And then finally, the last part of this plan is making sure that we are expanding coverage for the FAIR Plan. So there are some areas in the state and in LA County that $20 million for an entire HOA is not enough. So what we need is to increase that for, per structure in some areas. So, there might be different structures within an HOA that need to have that much insurance. And so we are working with a FAIR Plan to see if we can increase that as well. So this is the largest reform that we have done, since the voters passed Prop 103. And we are making sure that we are, meeting with as many people as possible so that people understand what is happening, but also know where they can call to talk to someone about their particular insurance policies. And so with that, what we have done, we have our 800 number where you can call and talk to an expert, an insurance expert, about your plan yourself. So I suggest, I urge you to please contact the department, and we are here to answer any questions as well.
Hey, any questions for Julia? Well, seeing none in the chat, Julia, I just want to thank you for your excellent presentation. I really appreciate you being here. I got a lot out of it. Is it okay if I share this presentation with anybody that requests it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. So appreciate you being here, Julia. We're going to go ahead and move on to our last presenter. I know it's been a lot of information today. And the last presenter will be me. I'm going to talk about a case study, which was the storm response from last month. And share my screen. All right, give me 1 second. Okay. Probably not right. So we're going to be talking about the 2024 February storms, response and recovery at the EOC level. I was the operations section chief for the majority of that response. Unique Day is going to co-present with me. She was planning section chief and also is on the recovery unit. Unique, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Unique Day. I'm an Emergency Coordinator 1 here with the City of Los Angeles in the Emergency Management Department, specifically the Planning and Resilience Division.
So let me actually read the stats because I want to give you all an understanding of what the storm impact was. So an atmospheric river impacted California on the 4th through 6th of February 2024, with widespread precipitation of 1 to 5 inches across most of California, with 5 to 10 inches in the coastal mountains and Los Angeles basin. Some areas of the San Gabriel Mountains received 10 to 15 inches of precipitation. Los Angeles recorded one of its wettest multi-day stretches on record. Heavy rain resulted in hundreds of mudslides and high flows on area rivers. So with that said, you can see what the impacts were at the EOC level. Even though this event, the activation lasted about 3 weeks, the majority of the damages came within that 3-day period. Over 140 incidents tracked at the EOC level, over 60 structures affected. And when I say affected, that means that they were either red tagged or yellow tagged. And those have different meanings, but Red basically indicates that the structure is damaged to the point where the resident can't re-enter. Yellow tag means that the resident can't access certain parts of the property or the structure itself. Throughout the incident, there were over 30 road closures, and then there were about 4 to 5 spontaneous evacuation spots, meaning that there were areas that were impacted by mud and debris flow to the point where the fire department had to come and order people to evacuate. And then there was also one planned evacuation, which I will get into later. And before we move to the next slide, I'm just going to ask a rhetorical question. If you had to ask yourself how you felt going into this storm before it hit, and then how you felt going into Tropical Storm Hilary, which one were you more scared of? And I will say that for me, it was Tropical Storm Hilary. I didn't know what to expect. I went out and bought a bunch of food and water. I thought I was going to have to batten down the hatches. And let's check out what happened. So for Tropical Storm Hilary and 2024 February storms, just look at these numbers up here. You can kind of see a big difference right there just from the get-go. About 4,311 service requests for Tropical Storm Hilary and almost 9,000 for February storms. Looking at tree obstructions, there was actually strangely more tree obstructions than 2024 February storms. However, if you look at land and mudslides, you will see that there's more than 10 times the amount of mudslide reports via 311. So this sort of gives you an idea of the scope of what we were dealing with this activation, how many incidents that we had to respond to, coordinating with different public works branches and law and fire branches. So it was a large incident. And as John said earlier, this was probably one of the more damaging atmospheric river events that we've experienced. So I'm just going to get into the timeline here. The incident was first being tracked by EMD late January through early February. Usually when we're tracking an incident like this or a weather system that's coming through, we will depend on a National Weather Service to provide briefings, whether it be daily or every other day. And then as we get closer to the event, Emergency Management Department will start hosting daily adverse weather calls. And that will include every city agency that has a stake in responding to any sort of adverse weather incident. On February 1st, that's when we began preparing for an actual large activation. So when we prepare for an activation, we have to look at things like setting up camera feed into the EOC so that we can see what kind of impact the rain is having across the city. We have to develop staffing plans, an EOC action plan. We have to develop operational periods. And then we have to look at other logistical needs like food for EOC responders. And then various other needs that sometimes aren't even anticipated and come along as the incident is progressing. On February 2nd, the National Weather Service issued a flood watch for all of LA County, and the LA County Public Works issued a Phase 3 debris and mud flow forecast for the Landfire burn scar. So as Lonnie said in her presentation, the forecast, once issued, a lot of the local agencies depend on that forecast for then developing their response. Our response was to issue an evacuation order, or I'm sorry, an evacuation warning for the Tunica Canyon Road area where that debris flow was predicted to hit. On the 3rd, National Weather Service projects high risk of life-threatening flooding and damaging flooding. And then we activate our Augmented Winter Shelter Program. Our Augmented Winter Shelter Program is something that the Mayor's Office coordinates with Recreation and Parks and Los Angeles Homelessness Services Authority to determine what level of shelter we need to provide for our unhoused population. For this event, we got up to 6 shelters, I believe, 4 of which were these augmented winter shelters. And sometimes it will be if the event isn't as actually I'll just refer to the second portion of the storm, which wasn't as impactful. For that second portion, they decided to issue hotel vouchers and motel vouchers. So you can see how powerful this storm impact was by the number of shelters that we had set up for our unhoused population as well. And then finally, on February 4th, the EOC is activated. And we start with 12-hour activation periods. An evacuation warning is issued for the residents of Latuna Canyon Road. We're activated at level 2. A declaration of local and state emergency is issued. And then this is where you start seeing the majority of the storm damage occurring. This is the heaviest period of the activation from the 4th through the 6th. This is usually when the Sepulveda Basin closes. That is a basin in the valley, which gets flooded out anytime it rains. So this rain actually caused the Sepulveda Basin to be closed for a significantly longer period of time than usual. On February 6th, actually, during this period, this is when you see a large amount of incidents start to be reported and recorded at the EOC level, a large amount of coordination from the public works branches, fire branch, law branch, utilities branch, and safety assessment branch. They're all working together to respond to a lot of these issues that were being reported. We saw over 100 issues reported during this period, and all recorded within those operations, within the operations section of the EOC. On February 6th, the EOC transitions to level 2 hybrid. This is when the storm has sort of, for the most part, passed. We're not foreseeing any other further coordination that might support any sort of field response to protect life safety. So we determined to demobilize to what's called a level 2 hybrid activation. Level 2 hybrid activation is basically where the EOC is still activated. However, you will have certain staff in person, which is usually staffed by the emergency management department, and they will be coordinating ongoing response to major incidents with the public works branches and safety assessment branch for the most part, as well as transportation branch. The Latuna Canyon evacuation warning is lifted as well during this time. So then LAPD has to develop a repopulation plan and basically put out that message to the people that were evacuated that they can now return. Between February 7th and February 17th, there was another storm predicted to impact LA. We maintained our activation level during this period at the level 2 hybrid to basically prepare for this coming storm, as well as respond to any unresolved incidents. On the 18th, EOC was activated at level 2, again with 12-hour operational periods. Thankfully, from the 18th through the 20th, although we were activated because we were predicting further damage, thankfully there was not much further damage reports coming in. So like I said, the majority of the damage occurred during that February 4th through the 6th period. And then finally, on the 23rd, the EOC was deactivated and transitioned to duty officer status. So I touched on this earlier, but these are the activation levels that were used during this event. As you can see, for that level 2 in person, you'll see the EOC, the majority of the EOC is, the seats are staffed. The operations branches, law, fire, utilities, safety assessment, mass care, public works, transportation, they are all almost fully staffed. For level 2 hybrid, like I said, we mainly focus on public works, safety assessment, and transportation. And then finally, although there may be incidents that still require coordination through via the EOC, the duty officer will take over that responsibility once the determination is made to deactivate the EOC fully. The duty officer continues to possibly hold coordination meetings, or will just handle any sort of EOC related requests just via phone calls. So just to give a sort of a brief overview, and I'm going to cover a lot of things that were already covered in the previous presentations. The fire branch for this storm, they provide swift water teams. I believe there were maybe 2 to 3 swift water incidents during that major storm period. They provide urban search and rescue teams, CERT teams, and then heavy equipment operators. The law branch mainly provided for this one evacuation enforcement. So whenever there is an evacuation ordered or warning, law enforcement, meaning LAPD, is responsible for enforcing that, meaning that if you're evacuating an area and people leave their homes, then you have to protect their homes from people that might want to loot them or any other issues that might occur. So they were doing that for not only the planned evacuation, but the spontaneous evacuation sites as well. Road closure enforcement, in coordination with Department of Transportation, LAPD was also involved with certain different road closures, mainly the Sepulveda Basin. And then providing security for any form of any other type of event that might occur. And for instance, the President of the United States was visiting during this period, and they contributed to the President's visit. The Mass Care Branch, Recreation and Parks, like I said, with LAHSA, they were coordinating the augmented winter shelters, evacuation sites, and large animal evacuation sites. The Latuna Canyon area had a large amount of horses and other large animals, so those large animals had to be evacuated. So we opened up Hansen Dam and the LA Equestrian Center to support those evacuations. And those were handled by Animal Services. Transportation branch, their main responsibility is to track road closures. The difference between a hard closure and a soft closure is a hard closure. You will not let anyone into that road. Soft closure means you can allow people in if they are locals, if they live there. So, for instance, the main hard closure that we had throughout the course of this incident was the Mulholland Road closures. There were 4 major slope washouts on that Mulholland stretch that we had to first put Department of Transportation officers there to enforce that road closure, and then later set up K-rails and other and signs to support that road closure. And then also the Transportation Branch provides traffic enforcement, meaning that instead of fully closing a road, they might want to redirect traffic or close one lane of a road. So then you need officers to direct traffic in those types of incidents. The Public Works Branch, the Bureau of Engineering, they had geologists. Basically, I don't know how much overtime they were working during this incident, but we were putting in requests for geological site assessments for pretty much every incident that came across our radar, and I know that they were extremely busy. Street Services, anytime we would get a report from Department of Transportation, Bureau of Engineering, Department of Building and Safety of any sort of incident that a mudslide or anything like that, Street Services, their responsibility is to go and clean up and possibly repair or put short-term remediation on that site, meaning sandbags, K-rails, things like that. So Street Services, extremely busy. during this incident. We were calling on them a lot. Sanitation, flood control, and debris removal to allow for those drainage channels to basically reduce flooding in certain areas. There was a couple major incidents where sanitation was crucial in basically reducing or draining the area that was flooded out. Utilities branch, so that's the manned by Department of Water and Power usually, but also we will have possibly a representative from SoCal Gas. But like Keith was saying, they have a variety of responsibilities, but it's maintaining electricity and access to water. So challenges. This was extremely fast-paced activation. For incident tracking, what we found was that there were, actually, let me first go over what the EOC process for incident tracking is. Generally, information flows through the EOC to the EOC from the different branches that might require EOC coordination to achieve their mission. So if the fire branch reports that they have conducted a rescue at a certain location, however, the location has extreme debris flow blocking the street, that is an EOC request that has flown through, that has gone through the fire branch. With vice versa, if we have a Department of Building and Safety individual responding to a 311 request to look at a damaged building and they can't get there because the street is either flooded out or blocked by debris flow. That is a request that came from their branch to the EOC so that the EOC can call on street services to clean that up. So these are how requests normally funnel through. However, with such a fast-paced incident like this was, with so many incidents occurring at the same time within that 2-day or 3-day period, there was a lot of basically not gaps, but I would say that there were a lot of incidents where we didn't have the information at the EOC level, and then we were provided it either by the media or we were provided it either by a council member who received an email directly from a constituent. Sometimes you had council members walking around the EOC basically asking us why this incident isn't being tracked. And that's when we determined, oh, this incident needs to be tracked. But we didn't have that information because there were so many incidents being reported during that period. Available resources and speed of reporting. So another challenge that we came across was that there is a difference or discrepancy in different departments in how many resources they have and how fast they can get to a location. I touched on it earlier. The Bureau of Engineering might only have 2 to maybe 5 geologists that they can actually dispatch to the field at any given moment. And maybe they're working overtime. They're not usually working weekends. So these are sort of things to consider when you need a geologist to do a site assessment in order to determine if a street is safe enough for street services to get there. So then if everything is hinged on one portion of that that site assessment, then response to an incident gets delayed. So there were issues with that. The speed of speed of updating incidents versus how often we were requested to update, for instance, the public information officers on an incident. That was an issue as well, because oftentimes departments or branches might only provide an update once a day when we might be requesting, or we might be getting requests for an updates like maybe 3 or 4 times a day. That was occurring as well. How to prioritize incident response. Another issue that we faced was what kind of priority are we giving to incidents based on what? If we're presented with 5 to 6 different incidents that all require immediate response, how do we prioritize them? We determined, you have to allow for major thoroughfare to continue. So that means that major roads have to be cleared before anything else. You have to then prioritize different levels based on what situation you're encountered with. Verifying information in a fast-moving activation. So another issue that we faced was not having full information or updated information on the incidents that we were tracking. So we had to send boots on the ground to go verify that incident, which takes valuable time, takes resources, things like that. So Los Angeles Department of Transportation officers, as well as LAPD officers, were driving canyons, looking at if they were flooded out, if they were damaged, then sending those reports back through the DOC and back to the EOC so that we could update the status of reported road closures accurately. Spontaneous evacuation security. So when these sites were spontaneously activated, there were reports that there were people entering people's houses that were evacuated from their houses. So LAPD made the determination to provide security at these spontaneous evacuation sites. That was, an issue that we did not anticipate, and we basically acted on that issue. And then finally, field safety and fatigue. There were definitely a lot of, like I said, the street services and also Department of Building and Safety and other responders didn't feel safe traveling up certain mountain roads because it was raining, there were mudslides, and they have heavy equipment. So we required Bureau of Engineering to go and assess those sites before they could go up there. And that was a challenge during the storm. And then finally, EOC fatigue. We were activated for very long periods. And there was a lot of, people were working up to 24 hours at a time for the fire department, and there was a lot of fatigue. Successes. So despite all of the coordination issues with the Public Works and Safety Assessment branches, we were actually able to resolve the majority of the reported incidents in a very relatively quick manner compared to last year's storms. The majority of them were resolved within just a few days. By resolved, we mean if it's a single homeowner, that the homeowner is responsible after the Department of Building and Safety has basically done a damage assessment and provided their input on what needs to be done. And then street cleanups, things like that. They were mainly, we were relatively fast in cleaning up the impacts of the storm. The minimal power outage periods, that was definitely a big success. We didn't experience that much significant power outage related issues to the point where the EOC had to worry about any of that. So that was definitely a success. Life safety, during that first period of storm, there were no fatalities, which was a huge success. Public information was accurate and timely. We had a joint information system set up that had access to the EOC floor, and there was a good flow of information there. We had GIS public facing maps that identified road closure spots as well as evacuation sites. And then finally, it can be said that this was a good simulation for what an earthquake would look like, a major earthquake. You would see incidents like this popping up across the city, and this was a good test of our capabilities in responding to an earthquake that might occur. So this presentation was sort of meant to look at this from my perspective, being an operations section at the EOC level, I didn't want to go into any details, but as you can see here, this was one of our operations huddles. This was a road closure tracker, this was an incident tracker, and this was a shelter site tracker. You can sort of see that there was a lot of information being tracked. There was a lot of coordination. There were a lot of moving parts. I felt that we did a good job overall. So I'll move it now to Unique for her section of our presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. So for the recovery with this type of storm and incident that we had, we were able to activate the recovery position within the planning section in the EOC by February 5th during the B shift, which is the night shift. And then we were focusing on restoring critical community functions for those who have been evacuated from their homes or may have faced any type of damage, making sure that we could get the proper resources to them, but then also making sure we're taking the proper assessments of all of our public infrastructure to make sure there's no damages or anything that needs to be reported. Because of the sheer size of the storms and just impacts that we faced, EMD, the Emergency Management Department, realized that we would have to do recovery in two separate functions. One as individual assistance, so those for homeowners, business owners, residents impacted, but then also the public assistance process, which focuses on recovery efforts to publicly city-owned property. So there's two images on the screen. So one, we had local assistance centers in person at 3 sites throughout the city. And with all of the efforts that were going on within operations that were being tracked, we were able to use GIS to see which sections of the city had the most impacts and then place local assistance center in those specific communities. So those are the 3 locations. They were advertised via our public information officer through traditional media as well as social media. So this is a screen grab from ABC7. And then this is also an image below of outside of one of the local assistance center. At the local assistance center, we did really connect a lot of residents with resources where it was a one-stop shop for not only city services, county services, state services, but also non-governmental partners. And we really tried to make sure that we didn't put the media inside the local assistance center, just because we do have residents who are severely impacted and they could be in a very emotional state. Next slide, Kellen. So as I mentioned, the recovery process, as we're still working through it for these storms, is a very large process. So it's not just, okay, tracking everything that's potentially impacted to city infrastructure, but it's also looking at individual assistance, which this storm was a really good case study and lessons learned of how we can learn for potential earthquakes and just large disasters, as we're moving into the individual assistance process, which the city hasn't had to do at this scale in such a long time. So one, having the local assistance centers, those were hosted virtually through the recovery website, but then also we had the in-person local assistance center. To this date, we've had 2 iterations of the local assistance center. The first initial website, we modeled it very much after LA County's website, just making sure we had that continuity of information, as some residents may not really be familiar with the difference between LA City and LA County, but they know they just need help and assistance in this moment. So we're making sure that the information is concise and is consistent and getting the information to them in the best way possible. As I mentioned, the in-person local assistance centers were one-stop shops of all the different resources so that residents don't have to worry about being transferred or put on hold and just having that additional frustration as they're trying to regather their documents and establish a new normal. We also very much encourage residents to participate in the LA County damage assessment surveys just to get an adequate grasp of what was going on, who was most impacted, and just knowing what type of things we need to be able to help individuals on moving forward in this recovery process, as we still are right now. And then for the public assistance side, this is something that we're typically used to. It's done within the finance section of the EOC, and that's tracking those damage assessments from all of the public works bureaus, the Bureau of Engineering, those red tag buildings, building and safety, everything that they're doing to make sure that we're getting that information up to the county, so that way they can put together their initial damage estimates and submit that to the state. That's including those site visits that were done in coordination with the county and the state and other EMD staff. So recovery, as you can see, based on this graphic, was very widespread and overarching for this incident. And it's really teaching us a lot for moving forward of best practices in one, how to move forward in recovery faster, but also just having that repeatable process that we can model to future incidents and disasters that we face. And that's all I have for you.
All right. That's it for our presentation. I will take any questions now. Unique and I will take any questions. I know that we're over time, so let's go ahead and I'm just going to share finally our last screen here. So I want to thank everybody for attending today. I'm hoping that you got a lot of information out of this. If you missed the first portion of this or missed whatever portion you may have missed, it's all going to be on our YouTube. Upcoming webinars, May is going to be our safety assessment webinar. July is going to be our mass feeding and hydration webinar. And then September is going to be a recovery webinar focused on individual assistance. Here are our socials. You can check out that YouTube channel. I will also email it to you all. And then you can go to Ready LA on all the different socials. There you'll have access to resources like Ready Your LA Neighborhood or Ready Your LA Business, which were referred to earlier. And you can also get updates via those websites for anything emergency related. So I will open it up now to any final questions. How can one become involved? Volunteer? So that's a good question. I think there's many ways you can get involved. I think you can pursue that Ready Your LA Neighborhood to sort of get involved with preparing your neighborhood locally. That's a good start. There are also for volunteering, you could try to join the CERT team. That's through the fire department. And then mayor's office has a crisis response team they're very crucial for any sort of if we have to set up local assistance centers or any sort of emergency that might require them, that's volunteer based as well. And then for emergency management department aspect, at least career wise, we accept emergency managers all shapes and sizes from different backgrounds. But if you're interested in that, I'd recommend looking at sites like governmentjobs.com, things like that, to get into it. So, and do any of our other presenters have thoughts on that as well, if I missed anything?
I would also add INLA, the Emergency Network Los Angeles. City of Los Angeles works with INLA as far as our non-governmental partners. So it's everything from the Food Bank, American Red Cross, Team Rubicon, CORE, and different non-governmental organizations that when we do volunteer work related to disasters, whether it be outside in the field or maybe at a local assistance center, whether that be staffing or just helping us with the data input for certain things, we're typically going to refer to INLA as it encompasses all of the NGOs that we use.
Thank you, Unique. Okay, well, thanks again, everybody, and look forward to the next one. Have a good one, everybody.